We're going to start this puppy up. Clear, drop. And welcome back to building the Affordaplane. This week we're going to show you how we covered the vertical fin, the vertical stabilizer. And later we can talk about how we painted it, but for now let's get started with the fabric covering of the vertical stabilizer. And we do have some hinges over on the left side that we have to watch out for, but other than that, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to cover it with one piece on one side and then flip it over and cover the other side. That would be easiest. Our first step is to identify any sharp edges, like the gussets, for example. And we want to hit them with a file. Now remember, our fabric is going to be taut over these very tightly after we iron it out, and we don't want the sharp edges abrading the fabric, which will wear it out over time. Even though there isn't a lot of movement with the fabric over there, there is vibrations and there's wind and things. So I'm just going to take a file and knock off any of the sharp edges. We're going to cover these with tape, protective tape, before we put the fabric on, but I first want to go through and just hit all of these sharp edges with the file real quick on both sides, and then we'll put our tape on. Now here's the tape I am using for protecting the fabric. This is from Superflight. It's about an inch thick, and it's sold at all the aircraft supplies house. Basically, it's a way to prevent abrasion on these sharp edges. Let's take a look. If we look at this gusset, for example, the fabric's going to be stretched around the tube, and then this way around the tube, and then this way. So this edge, and this edge all come into play with the fabric wrapped tightly around it. That's not a big deal, but basically we're going to wrap that over the edge, and now that edge is protected. So it's very inexpensive insurance against wear over time and wearing out the fabric. And I'm also going to cover the other edges. So covering the edges of the gussets on both sides. Another example is the end of our tube. I put a tape around that because, again, that had some sharp edges. First hit it with the file and then the tape. Now, after covering up our sharp edges with the tape, we want to wipe down the tubes with our favorite solvent, and that's because we'll be attaching glue and we want the surface cleaned. So I'm simply going to wet my rag with the solvent and give it a good once over to get off any strange materials on the aluminum. We now have all of our sharp edges covered with our protective tape. And notice I have cut out a piece of our fabric about 2 inches or so wider than the perimeter of the frame. And so we will commence with covering one side. Now, I'm working on it from this direction with the hinges towards me because that will help us make the slots for the hinges. Now, we're going to be rolling the fabric up, and of course the hinges are in the way, so we need to make a slot for 1, 2, and 3 hinges. So this is the way we're going to do that. Once you have your frame in the proper location on your fabric, you don't want to move it anymore, at least for this next operation. Basically, I want to mark out a little rectangle for this hinge. And the easy way to do that is take a ruler, put it alongside the hinge and then simply outline. I'm just using a ballpoint pen so that it shows up on here, okay? And then one on the other side. And then one going across the top. And basically, this rectangle, I will close the back side of it, is going to be where we're going to cut out. Now, without moving anything, let's move to the next hinge and do exactly the same thing. Once I have drawn all three of them, I can move this out of the way and go ahead and finish off the rectangle. And then the third one. And then we can cut these out. So this is very easy to do. Here's my middle hinge, the little rectangle. I'm going to fold it in half. Just line it up, looking through the fabric. And then I'm simply going to cut this on the camera, okay? Cut there. And I cut there. That should leave a flap. And then we just cut the flap off. And that should leave, I didn't do a very good job, but you notice there's my rectangle there, and that'll be in the right spot. I'm just going to move over now and do the other two cuts. So here's our three holes, and what this means is you should be able to now fold the fabric up over the hinges and find that you got a pretty good fit. Now we're ready to apply glue to our tubes. We're using the EcoBond water-based Stewart systems. I poured some into a small cup, and then I have my holder here. It makes it very nice so I don't spill it, just like they show in the manual. And then basically we're going to cover our tubes here. Now, it's important to understand how we're going to cover this. We want to cover basically the top no lower than halfway down, and on the other side no lower than halfway down. So basically the top half of this. And that way we keep the fabric from adhering in the right location. If we want any lower, then it's going to start sticking and it won't lay flat on the other side. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply a wet coat. And I'm also going to cover it on top of the tape here too, because it needs to stick there. I'm going to go all the way around all of the tubes, all the way around, until I finish. Once the glue has been applied and dried, now it's just slightly tacky, we're going to start folding the fabric into place. We're going to start it where the hinges are and get this in place. What's nice is that the fabric will stick to the slightly tacky surface. I want to keep everything nice and smooth and laid out here. And we can just use our fingers to roll the fabric in place. Now when we come over to the corner here, we have to be a little bit creative because we want to fold this over. So I'm going to make a cut here so that I can fold this piece over on top. So I made a cut here, and I also cut this part off because we really don't want to cover down here. This is where it attaches. So we can bring this up and fold this over, same way, rubbing it into the glue. And then let's come down to the other corner here. And we're going to have the same issue down here. We're going to want to make a cut so that this can fold over. So I made a cut here so that this would fold over. And notice how the glue allows us to it sticks in there real nice. And then we're going to fold this over, and we can cut off this tail here. So I'm going to fold this up and over also, all three sides. I trim this up here, and then we can roll this up here. And we have our curve down there. And one of the nice things about this glue is that you can pull it off and put it back on if you want to reposition it. Basically, we're going to go around like this, except that we're going to use our iron to help shrink it around and get rid of the wrinkles the best we can so that it lays nicely. Here we want to trim off basically this part here. Because this will all be part of pulling this up here and around this corner. Now, we will use our iron in a moment. It's heating up to pull this up and shrink it as we come around. So feel free to pull this off and back on anytime with this glue, the tacky glue underneath, because that's one of the benefits of this, is the ability to reposition whenever you need to. Okay, so we're going to try and make it around this corner. I have my iron set at about 275, and we're going to get it to try and lay as nice as we can. Around the corner. You should certainly watch the videos that I have in the links on the Stewart experts doing this. They will do a lot better job than I will do, because I am certainly in the learning process also. I should point out that you do get a second try at this, because you are going to put another side onto this, which will cover up, obviously, the outer radius of the tube. And so you won't see all of these wrinkles here. If you can see that. So I certainly do have some wrinkles. I will flatten them down with a little more shrinking. The heat tacks the fabric to the glue, and also if you leave it on for any length of time, it will shrink the fabric. So I'm going to go over all of the glue areas to tack it down, just not completely tack it down, but kind of acting like a spring clamp. It will hold the fabric in place, because our next step is going to be to add the final glue to this to make it permanent. So now I'm going to go all the way around the perimeter and just hit it quickly with the iron. This will tack it to the glue. And then we will be ready for the final gluing. Here's my corner. I definitely got a few creases in there, but I ironed them pretty much flat. Now remember, we'll have a piece that goes over that, so we get a second chance to make that look even a little bit nicer. And I cleaned up the corners so that we wrap into here and we wrap down. And this is just set up here, this wrap down, and that wrap down there. So now we are ready to apply our final glue. And we're basically going to put the glue exactly in the same spot that we had underneath it, except we're going to soak it through and then wipe it off. Let's take a look. We want to have a bunch of paper towels ready for this next operation. So basically now we are going to put the glue on right where we had underneath. So we go back to our glue cup and start applying it on. Put a nice wet coat on, and we're going to do about a foot at a time, roughly. And once we put that on, we're going to take a paper towel and wipe off the top excess. We're pushing the glue into the fabric by doing this and removing the excess from the top. And we simply continue on, putting the glue exactly where we had it underneath. And then wiping it off. Simply repeat this all the way around. After applying the glue and then wiping it off all the way around, we're going to let it dry for 15-20 minutes or so, and then we can come in and trim off the excess just using our scissors, and we can just trim off anything that's excessive inside of here. It's just extra weight, and so the trimming doesn't have to be perfect, but obviously get rid of anything that isn't actually sticking to the side of the tube anymore. With all the trimming complete inside, we can turn it over and see what we have. And I'm just going to let this dry a little bit longer, and then we're going to do our first shrinking. And I'm going to clean up the corner here by trimming up some of the loose fabric at the corners. Now we're going to set the iron to about 250 degrees. This is just an initial shrinking, and that will get things somewhat taut, and then we can move on to the other side. We don't want a final shrink, just initial shrinking at 250 with the iron. And we can use our small iron to get the tube and any other small places so that we don't rub against the gussets real hard with this big iron. And I'll use the small iron around the tube here. If you have any irregularities on the back side, your iron will also usually take them right out and flatten them down. And this will be nicer as we wrap the fabric around to have as smooth of surface as possible. And here's our corner. Turned out not too bad. A couple of very minor creases, and of course this will get wrapped as we put on our second cover on the other side. So we will now go get our other piece of fabric and flip this over. Now it's probably hard to see, but our next step is to draw a line all the way around about inch and a quarter from the edge. Here's my line. You can use a straight edge, and notice one here too going all the way up. I used pencil. It's probably the safest thing to do. If you have an 1.5 inch piece of extruded angle, that's just about the right size to draw a line, but this is going to become our glue line as we wrap the fabric around, but we're going to pre-glue up to this line, and it's important to have that on there so we know exactly where to brush the glue. So we need to take care of that as long as you can see the line, and be careful about using a pen or something like that. Pencil seems to work best. It will not show through the any finishes you put on afterwards. With our fabric laid out with a couple of inches along each side, our next step is going to be repeat what we did earlier on the original fabric, and that is to mark carefully the location of our hinges using the method we did before by drawing a line around the hinges and without moving, drawing them on the next hinge, etc., and then cutting them out. Another possibility is if you want to make a slit all the way and not cut out the little window, we could cut straight through and just feed it over. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and cut the little windows. And here we have our little windows. Check the fit. Now we can set this aside. Our next step now is going to be to glue the edge from no more than halfway down up to the edge. So the important part is get it more or less straight along the line and then down no more than halfway down. And we want to do that all along the edge, all the way around. No wiping off. This is just going to be glue that saturates into the fabric, and then we let it dry. If you get outside the line, not a problem. And we're going to go all the way around with this. There, now that didn't take long, and I'm going to let this sit for a little while. and we just want it to tack up. In other words, it's a little too liquid right now. So whether we come back in 15 minutes or 15 hours, it will be ready for us to fold our fabric on. Now I've positioned the fabric back at its location, and I'm going to start with the edge with the hinges. Our glue has dried to the touch, and that's fine. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. And basically we're going to work it by hand so that it makes contact and smooth everything out along the edges. Notice we can see the glue line underneath. I've slit this area in here so that I can pull this up and wrap this around using my hands and fingers to get it to grab and smooth it out, and I'll continue going down to the other end. And of course, we can pick this up as needed to turn it around and make it more easier to work on. And here I'm also going to slit it so that I can bring it forward. And I reposition the fabric slightly to get more up here because we were coming up a little bit short. And then we'll work on the last straight edge and then up to our curve up at the other end. And we'll trim off this area here after we get this rolled up. And we want to make sure we give some tension. Take out the tension as it's being held from the back sides there. We can always lift and look underneath to see that the tension, it looks relatively smooth back there. And we're going to work up towards our corner up here. And we're going to work this around. We need to cut out this flap here. Okay, here's our corner, and I'm going to try and navigate around the edge. I'm pulling it up tight, trying to keep this nice and smooth, and we can also hit it with the iron to help tack it down as we go around the corner. Because if we keep that smooth, then maybe the rest of it will stay smooth for us there. And I'm just going to keep working on this. So we got this pretty much in place around the curve. Our next step is to go around the entire perimeter of the structure with our small iron. Now, next, we want to draw a line with our pencil along the glue line. This is going to be our cut line. So we want to make a nice straight line using either a ruler or freehand, your choice, but basically marking the fabric up to that glue line all the way around, because it is from that point we're going to cut. So let me draw the line first. with that line in place, we can now pull the fabric up, and because we ironed here, we don't have to worry about it coming loose, but now we can use our scissors and carefully cut along that line all the way around. Now, with our edges trimmed to their final length, we're going to take our iron and smooth everything out, push it down, make it nice, and we're doing this prior to our final gluing. So now we're going to add our final glue. Again, have your paper towels ready, and we're going to apply our glue right where it was underneath, same location. We'll do about a foot at a time, more or less, while it's still wet, and wipe it off. Make sure we go all the way out to cover your edge. And then wiping it off. And you don't have to worry about overshooting the edge with your glue as long as you have wiped it off before it dries. Then that will not be an issue. In fact, we'll see later how we're going to fill the entire weave with this same glue. And we'll continue this process over the entire structure. Now that it's dried to the touch, we can turn it around, and we want to start our shrinking. So we'll set it at 250 and gradually take out . Isn't that nice? Now, of course, we can use our small iron to get any wrinkles along the edge of the tube or in areas around our gussets, the corner, and then also use our iron to flatten down any irregularities on our edges also. And then 350 is the final temperature on both sides. Start at 300 after your 250. We're at 250 now for our initial shrink. Then go to 300, and then 350 if you want. Don't go any higher than that. And we're just about done, completed with this covering. It wasn't too bad, didn't take too long. Some minor issues. We need to trim this. There's no reason that this has to be down here, so I'm going to trim it around here. And you can use some green glue to help it stick and keep it in place, but I'm going to trim this off, kind of like what was done over here. And it's about ready for coating, for painting. Plenty of areas for improvement for my work. Now, we got the curve relatively smooth around this area, but you'll notice some creases along here. Now, the painting will kind of hide some of those to a degree, but won't make them go away. I'm not concerned. I'm happy with it, considering I haven't done too many of these, but there's always room for improvement. And that's why we have more pieces to cover, thank heavens. So let's get on to our next piece. And there you have it. Now you see how easy it is to cover one of these tail components with fabric. even if it's your first time. If you'd like more demonstrations, for example, how to apply finishing tape, come join us over on Patreon, which is also the only place where you can get answers to your questions on any of these topics that we're covering. Also, we have links over there that show how the Stewart Systems factory-trained people cover, and you can learn from their professional techniques some of the things that I demonstrated. I'm kind of new at it, as you could tell. And next time, watch how I painted the components I used and how I carefully weighed before and after so we can tell exactly how much the paint weighs, so you can judge for yourself whether you want to go this way. Again, I used very inexpensive, available material, and yet it produced a very nice job. So until next time, everyone, please, back to building.